This graph shows that while in the 1980s, China's and India's economies started at roughly the same size, China soon left India in the dust.
Indian growth never gonna surpass China. The number one reason is, in China, which country will take over America first? Is it China? Is it India? A lot of people are wondering, with all the influx of Indian immigrants in America taking over all the top jobs. In fact, Indian immigrants, or just Indian in general, in America now average about $120,000 annual income, where China is about 80, the Chinese descendant, right? The Chinese population in America is about 80 average household income. And you have per person, not household. And you have the Americans, the Caucasian Americans, only $68,000. That's right. You know, it's just such a huge progression with the Chinese and Indian Americans in America with all the high-paying jobs. So which country will take over America first? Well, you have the question, I have the question, we have economists explaining who's gonna do that first. So let's react to this video and see who's gonna bring doom to the mighty United States of America.
This graph shows that while in the 1980s, China's and India's economies started at roughly the same size, China soon left India in the dust, becoming roughly 5 times its size. However, now with China's economy slowing down and Western companies seeking to move their factories elsewhere, could it be that it is now India's turn to replicate China's growth? Miracle? That is the question that has been keeping up both India and the world lately. However, to avoid cliché answers like it needs to reduce corruption, liberalize its economy even more, or increase education and infrastructure, in this video I've turned to 2 of India's most eminent economists, ex-central bank president Professor Raghuram Rajan and John Hopkins Professor Devesh Kapoor, and summarized their vast...
I will not remember their names, by the way. I mean, it's going to be Indian Professor A and Indian Professor
bodies
B.
of research into key insights about exactly 1. Why China's economy took off after the liberal reforms of the 80s and 90s, while India's did not. Why China's growth path will never work for India. And finally, whether or not India will soon be able to pull off its own growth miracle.
You know what? Before we watch this professional economist video, I kind of already know. You know, like, and I don't claim to know everything, by the way. If I got it wrong, let me know in the comment section. But as a common sense guy, I gotta tell you, I see Indian growth never gonna surpass China. The number one reason is, in China, the rich people actually go to China and build companies and build an economy locally in China. Whereas India, all the rich people are here in America. Like, you go look India, it seems like it's still a slump. Everywhere is still dirty, poor, smelly, all that kind of stuff. You have YouTube videos, people go to India and they just recommend every single video is like, never come to this country. This is the last time I ever come to India. It's always that kind of sentiment. Whereas you look at China, it's literally, I don't even know why China is still called a developing country. Like, I don't know the fine line between develop and developing. We can look it up, I guess. But the point is, you go to China, it makes all the American cities look like third world country. All the rich companies, all the rich people are in China, building China. And all the rich people in India are CEOs in America, right? Adobe, Google, you had just your name 2 off the top of my head, Microsoft. You have all these top CEOs here locally, and they're, I think, Apple, right? All the CEOs, you know, not Apple, but all the CEOs are all here. So like the rich Indians are here and leaving India to die poor. That's what it is. And they're using H-1B to move every single Indian who want to be rich to America. I think India's strategy is literally taking over US and making US the next rich India. That's what it is. But let's continue.
And I'm happy to report that in their research, I found some really surprising insights about how India's real problem is not that it didn't know what to do, but rather that it failed to properly implement China's strategy due to its own unique political structure in which understaffed local governments often cater to local interests rather than to the public. A structure that means that while there are other growth models for India to follow, the country could not and still can never grow like China. But to see why that is the case, we first need to answer why China outgrew India in the first place. In other words, what caused this massive divergence between India and China in the 1990s and early 2000s?
China's the GOAT. Well, what can you say? China's the GOAT. It moved all the companies in there. I think imported all the companies in China. It started out with the chief factory of the world. And now it's the factory of talents of the world. I think that has been slowly shifted into India. In fact, I heard rumor China may import laborers from India because the birth rate in China is slowly dying. It's 1.6 right now, way below the replacement rate, obviously higher than Korea and Japan, still very, very low, where India still remains a pretty high birth rate. So yeah, China may import talents from India. The point is, everybody's importing talents from India. America is, Japan is, China is, Korea is. Everybody's importing talents from India, leaving only the poorest of the poorest of the poorest still stay in India. That's why it's still so poor. I think that's exactly the reason why.
To answer that question, I first turned to the work of Professor Raghuram Rajan, who has highlighted that already in the late 1970s, Chinese workers had a better level of basic education than their Indian counterparts. A better level of basic education enables two key elements of how China transitioned from an agricultural society to the manufacturing powerhouse that it is today. The first element is that to supercharge economic growth, China started attracting a lot of foreign factories in the 80s and 90s. Factories that typically required at least a basic education from their workers so that they could follow simple instructions. The second element is that a basic education, especially in accounting, enabled a lot of these workers to then later start their own companies, which propelled China's economy to the next level in the 2000s. But given that there were plenty of countries with a better level of basic education than China in the late 1970s, better education alone cannot explain why China was able to attract foreign factories and enable its workers to start their own factories, while India was not. Indeed, as I discussed in my video about China's economic miracle, besides being able to attract foreign factories to learn from them, there are two other key ingredients that allowed China to transform its economy into the manufacturing
And what are they?
superpower that it is today. The first and most often discussed ingredient is that in the 1980s, communist China liberalized its economy, both by allowing private entrepreneurs to start companies and by allowing foreign firms to come into China.
And by the way, for those who don't know, this is called specialized Chinese socialism, right? I don't know the exact sequence for the word. In fact, I want to be accurate, okay? Because we're the goat. So what is Chinese socialism called? I think it's called Chinese specialized socialism, right? It's called Chinese socialism, officially called socialism with Chinese characteristics. Okay, that's right. Socialism with Chinese characteristics. It's super cool because it allows private ownership, entrepreneurship. So a lot of businesses just flourished. And then the credit, it was formalized by Deng Xiaoping, right? Everybody in China study about Deng Xiaoping. He was known as the one who made this happen, you know, and China joined WTO and officially become the world factory. So ever since then, it's just business and business and business. You see everybody starting businesses. Like growing up in China, we see business starting every day. You know, everybody's going to new immigration city. And then another thing is, if you grew up in China, you'll notice there are like special economy cities and then immigration cities. I grew up in an immigration city within China, a smaller city. And then they worked with a Japanese factory to start Dongfeng. It's called Dongfeng Car Manufacturer. A car manufacturer, I think that's what it's called, a company. And they manufacture basically Toyotas. They work with Toyota to make cars in China. It was like, but they didn't just like sell cars. They actually have Toyota factories, learn from them how to make cars and just made cars in China. And then the employees all learn how to make cars. And that's what China did, what I grew up watching, because we literally lived next to the factory. My house was next to the factory. It was actually a factory subsidized house in a way, you know, for the workers, because my dad was a worker to start off. So yeah, it was, you witnessed the business booming in China at the time.
In my opinion, this was indeed a necessary condition for the Chinese economic miracle to happen. But
I want to add another point. We have said this in the past, but just want to make it clear that right now, if you go to China, it's more capitalistic than America. In fact, I would argue America is more socialistic than China. You don't have that much, like Chinese socialism is in a way a lot of state-owned businesses, right? Like the China telecommunication, the China Telecom, and also the I think the China Mobile, and then all the telecommunication companies, all the gas, all the energy companies, all state-owned. And it's just, that's a specialty that we've seen. But other than that, most of the businesses you see in the market are all private-owned or public-owned businesses, you know, just entrepreneurship in large, okay? But in America, you see a lot of more socialistic programs like the social welfare programs available, the Medicare, Medicaid, everything in America, there are a lot of more socialistic, I would say, welfare programs for the society compared to China. So you can argue that point, but obviously I'm not a politician. I'm also not, I didn't study politics well when I was in school, so I don't know the exact differences, but day-to-day life, the people who experience the markets, who have lived in America and lived in China, you've asked them, and they actually compare, after you go back and think about it, they will tell you China is more capitalistic. Everything can be traded, everything can be talked about, everything can be negotiated, and just everybody understand the value of hard work, everybody at work for their money. Where in America, it feel like the current sense I'm getting is there's a huge population that have this sense of entitlement, where everything should be your right. Going to school should be your right. Going to bus should be your right. Transportation should be your right. Housing should be your right. We never heard of that growing up in China. Like, if you don't work, you die. That's what we know. So everybody in China is focused on economic growth. Every single family, every single household, they want their kids to study education because they want economic growth. That's the difference in mentality. And then I guess that's the power of the socialism with Chinese characteristics, right? Compared to American, I think America capitalism is now it should be called capitalism with America characteristics, right? It really is. A lot of it is socialism.
But given that there are plenty of more liberalized economies, it cannot explain China's rapid growth by itself. India is a prime example of that. Following China, India also carefully liberalized its socialist economy in the 1990s, and this was then followed by more radical liberalization in the 2000s. But while India's economy certainly grew faster after these reforms, it never quite reached China's double-digit growth numbers. Of course, you could then argue that India just didn't liberalize enough, and that may be true, but China is also still a highly restrictive place to do business today, scoring very similar points to India when we compare the two countries, for example, using the index of economic freedom. Therefore, to explain this massive divergence between the two countries, I believe that we need to talk about the second and third.
I don't think that's true at all. Like, I don't know where they get this index from, maybe for foreigners, but people in China, like my sister is an entrepreneur in China. It's really easy to start business. She built multiple businesses successfully ever since she was in school. So I don't think it's hard at all. In fact, if you ask my sister, it's really easy. She always tell you it's really easy to register a business in China. And also, it doesn't cost a lot of money, depends on which city you're in. In fact, many of my friends growing up, I would say most of my friends, their family are entrepreneurs. And even people who don't have a lot of money, they can easily start businesses in China. So I don't know what that index means. I don't know about India's situation, but in China, where I grew up, I witnessed how easy it is to start businesses. My dad started a business. My mom started a business. My sister started a business. It's not that hard to start a business. So I don't know what that index was. That seems kind of...
Third ingredients of the Chinese growth miracle. Ingredients that India was never able to reproduce, despite the best intentions. Okay, the second key ingredient of the Chinese growth miracle is that it followed what Peking University's professor Michael Petters calls the investment-led growth model. This is the growth model that was at the heart of miracle growth in countries like the United States, Germany, Japan, and then was later adopted by China. Essentially, the idea of investment-led growth is that in poor countries like China and India in the 1980s, they have a huge underinvestment problem. While they have a population that could potentially be very productive, they are held back by a lack of infrastructure, knowledge, and productive assets such as machinery. So to grow at miracle level speed, a poor country simply needs to invest at miracle level speed in infrastructure and other productive assets. But where does the money come from, in a poor country? Perhaps surprisingly for non-economists, a lack of money in even the poorest countries is never the real problem. After all, in a fiat money system, local money is infinitely available since the central bank can just print as much as it likes and use that money to spur unemployed workers into action.
That's why you don't want to trust fiat money. That's why you want to follow my finance channel and really understand what is money. We just have a new banger episode coming out. You definitely want to watch that. It took hours upon hours to research, study, and script, and also present it to you. After that, you will understand what is money, what is fiat money, and how you should really value or invest. I gotta say, coming to America, one of the best education I have gotten by myself, which is self-studied, is financial education. It's something that you don't really learn anywhere, okay? And it's something that I highly recommend all of us to study, all of you to study, along with me in a new finance channel. So make sure to go check it out because it is important for your own financial future as well.
However, because the central government of these massive countries alone cannot really hope to spend all of that money productively to prevent inflation, they have essentially outsourced most money creation to commercial banks who create money as debt. Debt money that will not produce inflation and will not increase debt to GDP as long as it is used to grow the economy. So to make sure that China's banks invest in productive infrastructure and factories, China ordered its local and state-owned banks to direct credit mostly to infrastructure and manufacturing at a low interest rate. And while these state interventions can now explain why China has too much infrastructure and even too much factory capacity, it worked extremely well when China was still a developing country. But what about India? Why didn't India try to follow the investment-led growth model and supercharge investments in factories and infrastructure? Well, actually, it did. While it liberalized its corporate sector, it kept its banking system largely in the hands of the state, just like China. And just like China, that banking system then went on a lending spree to well-connected business tycoons. However, unlike China's successful entrepreneurs, India's well-connected tycoons did not spend the money productively, which meant that around 2013, while China's corporates increasingly conquered the world, India's corporates were failing and heavily indebted to a state banking system that was close to collapse.
Before we continue, by the way, another thing that I want to talk about is the interest in China is super low. You can borrow money, I think 1% interest rate. Let me just confirm that, right? What is, let's look it up just to make sure, because my sister runs business in China and she does a lot of business with the bank. And then frequently when she borrows money from the bank, I just remember it's really low interest, but I don't remember exactly what it is. Interbank rate 1.4, 1.5%, 7-day reverse repo rate around 1.5%. And then deposit rate 2%. Dude, you can get houses and then pay back. The interest rate is super low. For business to do business, to borrow money from the bank, it's even lower, you know? So it's almost free money. You can just borrow money and try to expand your businesses. They made cash so available to the economy where business flourish. Now, I don't know the long-term effect of that because, you know, does it cause inflation? Because printing money is not good. But just like our money in macro, you know, was saying that debt is not inflationary. So I don't know that. I'm not an economist. You know, maybe you tell me in the comment section, you know, is debt inflationary? Because it's still printing money from thin air. It's just like government is not printing it and putting in the market, I guess. You eventually have to put it back and they have to kind of like, you know, delete the money, I guess. But it's end of the day, you're still putting money in the market. If this business go bankrupt, the money is still being spent in the market. Overall, you're still putting money. So I don't know if that's non-inflationary or it is. Let me know in the comments section.
Oh, I have to say that since then, India's investment has gotten much better. A recovery that was partially made possible by Professor Rajan himself, who as head of India's central bank helped clean up a lot of these bad debts. A lot of credit also goes to Modi, who has, since coming to power in 2014, made a lot of new investments in India's infrastructure. But while Indian investment and growth has not been bad at all, it has not been as miraculous as that of China. Therefore, I think it's now time that we revisit the third key ingredient of China's growth miracle, attracting foreign factories, which is also known as attracting foreign direct investment, or FDI for short. FDI gets its name from the fact that if you build a factory somewhere, you are directly investing. When it comes to FDI, while China became the factory of the world, India simply failed to attract anywhere close to the same amount of FDI. But why is attracting FDI so important? And why was China able to do it while India failed miserably? To answer these questions, let's go back to India and China in the 1980s. They were not just lacking infrastructure and machines, they were also lacking the knowledge about how efficient factories operate. Knowledge that you cannot learn in school. Knowledge that you instead accumulate by working in efficient factories. This is why attracting foreign factories to turbocharge local knowledge was the third key ingredient for China's growth miracle.
It's true.
On top of that, while local money is in theory infinite, as it can be created by local banks and central banks, foreign money, US dollars, is needed for crucial imports, such as in China's case, German machines. So attracting foreign direct investment is a key ingredient of most growth miracles because it can be used to supercharge local knowledge and to obtain the US dollars needed for crucial imports. And as we've discussed, China's basic education really helped create the right environment for FDI.
You know, I think that's part of it. Another thing is China just started first. It's like being Apple and all the people who want to copy Apple. And also, I came from an esports background, a gaming background. There is a huge advantage, almost insurmountable advantage if you do it right. In this case, China did it right. A first mover advantage, right? If you are the first who do it, like, because there's only finite amount of resources. Company doesn't have infinite amount of money. If their need is already being fulfilled so perfectly in China, there's no need to go to India. Like before this made in China became a meme or whatever in a lot of areas, or people like started become adversarial towards made in China products, or just before the Chinese manufacturing now is not actually that cheap anymore. Before, like, it was so cheap, right? When it was all so cheap, the companies already got all their needs fulfilled in China. Like everything was made in China. Like America, you go to Walmart, you go to anywhere, all the products, Amazon, made in China. But now it's slowly reducing. Now you see made in Bangladesh or made in like Vietnam or made in different countries in Asia, right? Southeast Asia, South Asia, whatever, what have you. It's just with China started first. And when you start first and your need, you already fulfill the need perfectly. Like, what do you think the entrepreneurs are going to say? They're going to tell their friends about, hey, you know, I recently got my products made in China and it's 1/10 of the cost. Then I do it here. And all their business start doing everything in China. It's word of mouth, right? People believe in their friends. I think that small circle just talk to each other. The network effect, the first mover advantage was really what kicked it off. Because if you think about it, China and India was equally poor. Why chose China over India? It's just China had the foresight and they did it first before India ever started. So now India want to copy it, but instead of having business move to India, you just have all the smart Indians come to America. That's exactly what happened. All the smart people are coming here. If you have some IQ, you're coming here. If you have some knowledge, you're coming here, right? Like the H-1B system is being abused to its max right now. And people are saying, like, criticizing that. I don't know if it's good or bad, but it's literally all the cities are the top tech cities are just Indian towns, right? Like Austin, India, like anywhere you go, new neighborhood, new constructions, Indian families dominated all the market of purchasing new houses, new constructions of $700,000 above. They buy expensive houses too. So I just see a huge influx of Indian talents in America. You know, they just don't stay in India. I don't want to go back. Who want to go back to a poor area, right? Like a lot of people actually want to go back to China because Chinese government invests in the business. Great opportunity to go back. And also, I think there's more of a country pride in a sense to go back and build China into a mega country. So it's just different culture and also first mover advantage. But that's, again, a common sense take over a very complex economic issue.
But according to Professor Rajan, there's actually a deeper difference between China and India. That is how well their local governments function. You see, because both the Chinese and Indian economies are decentralized systems on a massive, and I mean massive scale, it's really important to note that getting education investment and FDI right is really not something that is determined at the top. You need governments at the local level to actually implement these changes. And for that, they need the right incentives. And if we zoom into how China's local governments work, we can see that they had the right incentives to stimulate both local investment and foreign direct investment. First of all, local governments were all part of the Chinese Communist Party, and they would be promoted or demoted not based on how well liked they were by the local population or how loyal they were to the boss, but rather by how much they were able to grow their local economy. On top of that, a large part of local government revenue was to be generated through land sales. And given that the value of land appreciates when the right infrastructure is built, if local governors wanted to further their career in the party, one of their best options was to build infrastructure such that they could get more revenue and increase the GDP of their province or city. And okay, maybe also skim a little bit off the top in the process. Important.
It's not a little bit, it's a lot, right? It's always a lot. But corruption is everywhere. Look at American corruption, it's insane. But Chinese corruption, for sure there is. The thing is though, when they mention infrastructure, is such a key point. It's so true. My sister always told me, like, the reason why she wanted to become a pilot, because she sees aviation not as something that's cool. It's cool, but she sees aviation as another transportation method. And at its core, that's exactly what it is. When you open up the sky, that's just make transportation easier, right? Why do you take a plane? Is basically you want to get to somewhere faster, easier. It's transportation. So China, ever since I was a kid, was building infrastructure wherever you go. Right now, you go to China, you take the high-speed train, the bullet train, you go to, you take the plane, make how easy it is, the subway. It's all infrastructure. It's all transportation. They made everything so easy. You take the Chinese highway, for example, which people frequently do because sometimes the train tickets, the flight tickets are too hard to get. And also you want to move a lot of people, just take a road trip. You can. If you take the Chinese highway, which I do when I go back home and I do the road trips with my sister, you will literally be radicalized. You will feel like American highway system, like the infrastructure is literally crumbling. You will not say that. Like if you grew up and you never traveled to China, you never traveled to any just let's say China, you will not notice that. Right? I wouldn't say, I don't know about any other countries, to be honest. Compare US to America. Literally, if you actually went and experienced it, you will be radicalized and you will be so mad at your local politicians and your federal politicians. Like, what the criminal are they doing? Like, what are they doing to make the infrastructure so bad? And we pay all these taxes, and yet the roads are crumbling, and there's road bumps randomly everywhere on the highway. The highways in I-35 from Austin, Dallas, still under construction for 2 decades. You know, ever since I came here, I was in college, it was building. I graduated, it was still building. I started working, was still building. And I stopped working, do my own business, still working. Now, 2 days later, it's still working. It's just always under construction. What in the criminal is happening? Look at California with the high-speed train. You know what? Like, it's just so much corruption. Nothing's being built. Where China is just focused on transportation, because once there's transportation, once logistics taken care of, the economy naturally flourish. That's just usually how it is. Everywhere there's easy communication, and look through history, it's always the coastal towns from every single country that develop first because they have easy transportation. They're more globally connected to trade. And just, I mean, even if you're not smart, like someone like me, just a common sense guy, right? And you don't understand the complex economic system, you can see that as a pattern. You can recognize the pattern. We all have pattern recognition. So all the coastal towns get really rich. Transportation is literally the fundamental, the very bottom, the basic of an economy that allows energy to flow in, which build the economy.
These incentives meant that local Chinese governors were really keen to make things as easy as possible for foreigners that wanted to invest in their city. For example, as Professor Rajan describes in this book, when an Indian businessman wanted to invest in a middle-sized city in China, he was met at the airport by the deputy major, taken to visit a possible site on the same day, and then immediately taken to the major's office where all the necessary paperwork had already been filled out. Any problems he raised could be dealt with by the local government. Similarly, when Elon Musk came to China, he was able to have his Shanghai factory up and running in record time because local Shanghai government officials cleared all legal obstacles for him. Contrast this to India, where while the central government assured citizens that it was now a great destination for FDI, its local governments often actively frustrated the arrival of foreign firms by strictly upholding India's difficult regulations and making it time-consuming to get around them.
Really? Look how dirty the cities are. Like how often do you see clean Indian cities? I rarely do. Like you go online, I mean, obviously I've never been and I don't plan to go to India. But if you look at anytime soon, all the possible pictures that you can find online, besides a tourist attraction, a little bit of areas you find here and there, like a tiny little island in an ocean of trash, like you just see it's really dirty. Am I wrong? Let me know in the comment section, right? I don't know. It just feel like what do you mean by enforcing local regulations, environmental regulations? Like where, what are you talking about? China, people say like China, use coal, all this kind of like, different energy source. China streets are clean as hell. China streets are cleaner, probably, I would say multiple times than any American city street. Because American city streets are all tents, drugs, people shooting drugs on the side of the street, human feces, and smell of weed, smell of different kind of marijuana on the street. In China, you will never smell that. You probably smell people smoking. But that's like everywhere. Everywhere people smoke here. So outside of smoke, that's something that you actually do smell, right? Because a lot of people smoke. Outside of smoke, there's clean streets, clean everything. There are people clean the street every day. You don't see like trash everywhere. Some cities still have, but major cities, really clean. You can take a walk anywhere, right? It's just really, really clean compared to US. So I don't know about India upholding their regulations because I don't see it being reflected online anywhere. Maybe someone is recently in India. If you have some picture to share, let me know. Maybe I'm seeing this wrong because I've never been. And I don't want to criticize something I don't know, right? Because I've never experienced it myself.
In summary, following the insights from Professor Rajan, China was able to outgrow India initially because it had a better level of education. And while both countries liberalized their economies, only China was able to successfully invest on a colossal scale and attract enough foreign direct investment to supercharge its economic growth. Finally, it's not that India's central government was not aware that it needed to invest more and attract FDI. No, the deeper reason why India was not able to keep up with China is that its local governments did not play along, whereas in China, local governors had the right incentives to promote both local investment and FDI.
You know, that's why the Chinese, like, there was one time I read an article about AOC declining Amazon building a factory in her district. And dude, she's literally the biggest joke in China. Like everybody, we don't even know, right? Why is she still in office? But that's the thing about America, right? That's also why America is good and bad. Like the good part about being in the US is freedom. Everybody can do anything here. The American dream is available to anyone, right? You can be a bartender today, but you can be a congresswoman making an insane amount of money, worth millions of dollars when you get out of office. Tomorrow, right? That's literally AOC. I mean, think about her declining jobs. In China, growing up, we frequently hear about stories of this local mayors will fly to business owners' office. They will fly and to build a relationship proactively with business owners for them to bring factories, bring businesses into their city. Every time when there's a new project, that's like especially bigger profile factories or manufacturing facilities being built, especially now AI, now data center, all those trying to be built, you will hear like province governors, I don't know if that's the right word to call them, the city mayors fly to the headquarters of those businesses to get the entrepreneur different incentives, offer them different incentives for them to build a business there, to build jobs. That's the difference, right? One is common sense, another one's AOC. that's the difference between China and the US.
And sadly, if we next turn to the work of Professor Devesh Kapoor, I'm afraid it will become clear that not only did dysfunctional local governments hold India back in the past, they also mean that even today, India can never grow like China. Okay, to understand why India's local governments are failing to unleash a China-style miracle, let's now turn to Professor Kapoor, who has identified the 3 most plausible explanations.
Okay.
First explanation is really straightforward. India's local governments are terribly understaffed, especially when compared to China, which greatly increased its local government capacity during its growth miracle. Indeed, if we look at this graph, we can see that the structure of India's government employee count is basically the opposite of that of China and the United States. Whereas in the US and China, by far most government employees work at the local level and only some at the state or federal level, in India, it is the other way around. Most of India's government employees work at the state and, to a lesser extent, federal level, whereas only a few work at the local level.
So it's basically more corruption, right? There's more big dog in India. Is that what it's trying to say?
This can explain why India's local governments were not able to invest or help foreign investors around the rules on the same scale as their Chinese counterparts did. But if just a local capacity was the only problem, then it could simply be solved by giving the local governments more money to hire more people, right? Well, sadly, that will likely not completely fix the problem. You see, there is something really strange going on with India's local governments. Despite high unemployment, many local governments have thousands of unfilled open positions. Even worse, some of India's poorest local governments do not even spend all the money that they get from the central government. So what else is going on? Well, this brings us to Kapoor's second explanation of why India's local governments are not living up to their potential. India's infamous caste system, which divides people into a hierarchy of social categories based on their birth. But before getting into how, we should note that the caste system has effectively been outlawed. However, despite that, in many parts of the country, it is still very much a political reality. The caste system can explain India's dysfunctional local governments in 3 different ways. Firstly, realizing that the caste system was still strong at the local government level, India's founders on purpose made sure that local governments were not too powerful, which can explain why this graph looks the way that it does. Secondly, even if a local government has adequate capacity, they might not have the right incentives, meaning that they may frustrate the implementation of well-meant central government policies because it is not in line with the caste system. As an example, Professor Kapoor mentions that quite a few federal education programs where schools were built to improve the education of girls failed at the local level because, and I'm quoting, what happens within the classroom is affected by caste and gender norms. Thirdly, in some
Before we get to the third point, it's so true. Like I hear about it because I have Indian friends in America, and then they tell me about what's happening in India as well regarding that caste system. It's totally true. And you watch all these videos online that talk about some similar phenomena, right? The societal hierarchy is so strict, even though, as you mentioned, it's being outlawed or whatnot, but within local people, within the older generation's heart, they still have the biases, the societal biases towards people. Oh, you're born in a lower class. That's also why the workers are coming, the smart ones, right? Just because they're born they got the bad spawn RNG. They're born in the wrong area. They're born poor in a poorer family. They're born in a lower class. They're all coming to US. They're all coming to America, right? To start, because US doesn't discriminate. They come here, they start a new family, and they make insane amount of money. Doesn't matter if they frequently make more money than the people who laugh at them, look down on them. So this is why US is such a great country. You know, it's a land of the free, offer a lot of people inspiration to change their lives. Also why esports is such a great industry, even though it's such a hard industry to grow. But esports also is a level playing field. Everybody treated completely equally just based on your skill, and everybody from the entire globe can participate. There's no discrimination in esports. It's just whether you're good or not. You're good or bad. So on this point, it's totally true, because I think I was about to say earlier, but I didn't want to get into it because I feel like the caste system is very, very political. But it for sure is a hard restriction that's like stopping India from growing fast. Sadly, I don't think that will ever be solved now. I think it just takes time for the older generation to completely die off and for the newer generation to replace. You know, look at America. I think America will probably have a chance to grow, to slow down its inevitable like death, right? In a way, from a societal standpoint, if the newer generation is allowed to take the place of the people who are just zombies in the Congress. You know, like look at all those people who are so old and still higher up in the political system, which make no sense. The political terms for people who are in the position of power need to be implemented. I just don't know when that will happen. So it's just a matter of time.
In extreme cases, the caste system even leads to government vacancies intentionally being left open because they only have candidates from higher caste. For example, in their book, The Narrow Corridor, Professor Asamoglu and Robinson describe how in one of India's poorer states, Bahir, the state had thousands of vacancies for engineers that were not filled despite high unemployment. Why not? Well, because those qualified to be engineers are typically from higher castes, but because the province's reigning governor Lalu Prasad Yadav was from a lower caste, he refused to fill these positions. Of course, as a consequence, everyone suffered because the government of Bahir was so severely understaffed that it could not even spend all the money it got allocated from the central government to upgrade local infrastructure. But okay, that is an extreme case, which may not be applicable to all states. What is applicable to all of India, though, is the third reason why its local governments are not enabling businesses like their Chinese counterparts, and that is that India is a democracy. Now, I want to stress that in itself, this is not a problem at all. Sure, in China, the incentives of a promotion in the party meant that local governors could override local concerns to build infrastructure and go out of their way to attract foreign firms. However, in well-functioning democracies, this does not need to be a problem, since there the democratic process itself could give local governors the incentive to invest in their cities and to attract foreign firms. After all, if you as a local governor grow your economy, then you're more likely to be re-elected as local governor again. Indeed, democracy has produced the vast majority of growth miracles, ranging from West Germany to Italy to Japan and to the United States. However, unlike these countries, Professor Kapoor claims that India is a so-called precocious democracy, meaning that a country became democratic before it was perhaps ready to become democratic. Again, Professor Kapoor discusses 3 reasons why this is holding India's local governments back. The first is that a precocious democracy can get into a vicious cycle in which it delivers poor public services like schools and healthcare at the time that it is established. As a consequence, wealthier people will exit the public system and start using private schools and hospitals instead. And therefore, they are now less willing to pay taxes, making local government services even more dysfunctional. Indeed, as Professor Kapoor notes, local governments in India in particular seem to be very hesitant to raise their taxes, the taxes that they need to improve their cities. But sadly, there's more. The second reason why being a precocious democracy is holding India back is that because India is so divided, local government officials that were elected by their specific caste or religious group or any other interest group tend to prefer rewarding their voters by giving them subsidies or other specific benefits rather than to invest in public services that can be enjoyed by all. Finally, in precocious democracies, politicians will tend to emphasize public goods that are highly visible and relatively easy to provide. For example, they may prefer to invest in hyper-modern metros rather than to invest in improving the education system, of which the results will only be seen after a few years. Of course, this happens in any democracy, but more so in precocious democracy is what Professor Kaput argues. So on the surface, India did not grow as fast as China because it lacked basic education, didn't invest as much, and didn't attract as much FDI. But the deeper reason is that India's local governments did not have the capacity nor the right incentives to improve education, invest a lot, and to attract FDI due to a lack of personnel and wrong incentives provided by the caste system and India being a precocious democracy.
So in conclusion, guys, China will take over US. That's literally what it's saying.
Sadly, despite a lot of good intentions by the Modi,
China will take over US on the global stage in terms of China being the dominant country, and India will take over US in terms of actually physically, right? Like basically all the Indians, the smart Indians will be here and turn America into Indianka. I don't know, right? Like it's literally America, the top society of America is all dominated by Indians right now. It's insane, like it's actually insane. So, and that's going to be turned into a cycle, right? Like more Indian CEOs, you would have more imports from India, right? Because they want to get all the smart people to come over here, change their life. And those people want to stay here. They don't want to go back to a country with caste system, with locals, with political system that's so corrupt it cannot be changed, right? People's power are protected. So they just stay here. So the Indian population in a way will take over America over the next 20 years, and China will take over America in terms of global presence and develop China into the next superpower. So, all in all, America's doomed. What can I say? Being a proud American citizen, we're hopeless, guys. We're hopeless. This is it. It's over.
Government, all of these causes of India's local government dysfunction are still in place. And this is why I am confident to say that India can never grow like China, especially now that Modi, who became increasingly autocratic in recent years, lost his majority in parliament. So does that mean that there's no hope for India to ever catch up to China? No, I'm actually quite optimistic because there are still a few reasons to be optimistic about India's economy. First of all, if we compare India to the place it was in the 1980s, we will see that while it may not have gone through miracle growth, people are now better educated and its infrastructure has received a major upgrade, especially on the digital and financial side. And given that foreign companies are increasingly looking for an alternative to China, India is in theory really well positioned to attract a lot of foreign direct investment now. Of course, FDI in India has not yet been anything to write home about due to the fact that the local governments do not have the capacity or incentives to help foreign firms navigate its complicated rules.
It's so true. Now you go to the Nordstrom, you go to different malls, you see a lot more made in India products. But why do we care? Why do we care? Like, he has hope that India will surpass China. It doesn't matter. Either way, America's doomed. How about talk about more of what's going to happen in the US? Which country's going to take over US? Like, how does US stop the bleed? I don't think it can. It gets to a point where everything's so expensive, so hard to build. It's impossible to buy a home here. It's impossible to build business here. It's impossible to do everything here. The only one who can do anything is services, online services. The physical stuff, forget about it, right? In America, you don't worry about building actual physical stuff here. It's impossible. Your overhead is too high. You cannot borrow money from the bank. The interest rate is way too high. And there's a Federal Reserve who keep on printing money to lower everybody's actual wealth that they hold. And we're still not back to Bitcoin standards. So, what can we say, right? Let's just, either way, either one, India, China, whoever wins. Obviously, China most likely will win because I don't think Indians are going back to it. The high-earning Indians are going back to India in any shape or form. They're going to stay here. And by the way, to think that they will donate money back to India to help the local government is a pipe dream. They're already paying insane amount of the taxes in the American system. And to say, okay, well, now your leftover money, you're going to pay some money or donate some money back to the Indian economy, you're just dreaming. Forget about it, right? That's literally what it is. So, yeah, I think India, China, it's just exactly as what I said. Those two countries, China will take over the world, India will take over America.
However, now that India has elected a more democratic coalition government, some have argued that this could mean that Modi now has to work more closely together with local governments to push through reforms. Closer cooperation in a divided nation will never put India on the path of China, but it could put it on the path of the United States, a big divided nation that went through a slow, messy, but what in the end turned out to be the most successful growth miracle of all time. Finally, perhaps more importantly, as Professor Kapoor notes, a successful implementation of various programs such as opening bank accounts, gas connections and toilets that connect to the sewage system. This demonstrates that slowly but surely local government capabilities are improving. But yeah, I don't expect a China-style miracle anytime soon, but I am still optimistic about India's potential to grow in the upcoming decades. But yeah, that is my take. Do you agree with me that India can never grow like China, but that it is now actually well positioned for its own unique, messy, slower, but perhaps ultimately more successful growth miracle? Let me know in the comments below. Finally, given that primary education is often a local government responsibility and that this capacity has recently increased, this could mean that this is where improvements will be felt next, which could be huge because having a broadly shared basic level of education will give more Indians access to an unprecedented wealth of online materials, such as the unique lessons provided by today's video sponsor, Brilliant. Brilliant's thousands of lessons in math, data analysis, programming and AI.
Now we're getting to sponsors. Brilliant. I think is a website I have never used, but I heard a lot of ads for sure. I'll link the video down below so you guys can watch it. It's end of the day, this is sad to watch because when I watch it, all I can think about is what about United States, right? It seems like there's no way forward outward. There's no growth path forward. The only way forward is probably AI. If America actually wins in the AI race, and then we don't know what's on the other side of the hill. Nobody knows. Like all the entrepreneurs, the top executives have all said their opinions about AI, which is, nobody knows, right? Everybody's building it. Everybody's racing towards it. But what's at the end? Nobody knows. So maybe AI will change America and help America assert its dominance on the global economy. We don't know. At this rate, right now, what we're seeing with all the amazing, issues that American people seem to care about, such as gender issues, donations to, all the charities, NGOs across the world. Yeah, I think it's on the right path to destruction. So let me know in the comment sections what you think, right? If you have enough money, if you have the fuku money like Elon Musk or all Jeff Bezos, all these billionaires, would you still stay in America, right? What would you do to help build America? Would you give more money to NGOs? Leave a comment down below, let me know. With that, Sunday signing off. I'll see you guys next time.